What is IP exchange? There's some misunderstanding. IP exchange does not refer only to the transfer, buy, sale of the IP. IP exchange is what? Just like stock market, stock exchange, NYSE, New York Stock Exchange, right? And that's for security. But for IP assets such as patent, trademark, copyright, they also need some organized effort to facilitate, to promote the transfer, sale, or utilize of this exchange. So we call it IP exchange. It's a facility, it's an organized effort with certain rule to guide the exchange. Okay, but there are two things or two interesting aspects I have to point out when we mention about IP exchange. Okay, intellectual property, patent, trademark, copyright its value can only be reflected when you utilize this. Someone use this IP to generate real goods or service, then IP's value can be realized. And if the owner of IP does not have the operation facility, they don't have a factory, they don't have a restaurant, they don't have those equipment, they can license or sell those IP to those one who have, right? This is called the IP circulation or IP transaction. And in West country, in particular US, this kind of transaction or IP are usually carried out by private party. That means some very professional company. They research and put IP into pool and approach the potential buyer to make such transfer or give a license to those potential users called the licensee. Okay, but in China, for very interesting reason we'll mention in the next page, this kind of IP exchange are almost sponsored by the government. It's different route of development. Okay, another interesting aspect to mention is IP exchange actually is much harder to operate than stock exchange for two reasons. First one, the IPs usually are not standardized. Okay, so if you go to the stock exchange, the security you buy basically is piece of the share of the equity owned by the company according to company law or security law. However, if you go to the IP exchange, each piece of the information is not standardized, right? They have their own technology aspects. They have their own unique natures. So you need a distinctive domain knowledge to carry out the transaction. So these are the two special aspects about IP exchange. So what kind of information we can obtain by looking at the IP exchange in China? Okay, the first one, very interestingly, by looking at how or why IP exchange become so welcome, or there are so many of such IP exchange in China, you can get some insight. There's some historical reasons. No matter where in the US or in Europe, I think you've heard about Chinese government to subsidize into patent application. Okay, this policy has been quite criticized, no matter domestically or globally. And in the past few years, they start to correct to rectify this over subsidization of patent. Okay, because it's generate a lot of useless patents. However, the resource already been poured in to create a patent. Now the patent owner are much eager to find a way to monetize it, to utilize it. Therefore, an IP exchange at this particular point could help them to find the value of their stock, their asset that they create during the past few years, where government give a lot of subsidization for them to apply patents, try to liquidate the asset. It's a huge pressure. The second historic reason is the real estate economy. So probably different from US and different from Italy. If you may know, in China, then they use the right belongs to the government, right? When the real estate developer want to develop land, they need to apply and get approval to get a land transfer for this particular project. Okay, for example, if a real estate developer want to create or develop an industry park, industrial zone, then they will emphasize, okay, we are not only create IP, we create innovation, we also facilitate the exchange of the patent to find more value of the patent. So we'll also set up an IP exchange in our industrial park. Okay, that is a plus. Government will come to see more of that. So it's become a like must do when you try to do industrial park, when you try to win more government support, because people think that's the right way to utilize patents. And the second observation is most of the IP exchange are connected to China's national campaign. What do you mean by China national campaign? Which means China's most recent effort, either globally or domestically. You can just by looking at the title of the stock exchange in the past few months, newly built one, you understand, okay, the current focus is in this area. For example, a couple of years ago, many IP exchanges are built under the name of Belt and Road. Okay, I don't know what this really means, but basically it means this exchange will be focused on patent and trademark copyright exchange with countries covered by the Belt and Road or like international aspects. And a few years ago, Chinese government started to focus on the military technology transfer into civil use. They call the military civil collaboration. Okay, this kind of practice has been, how can I say, very a routine practice in most of the countries, such as the US, right? They have the program that national defense will give to MIT to develop technology. The military use some and the civil engineer will use some. And China also tried to learn from this kind of model called military civil collaboration. For this kind of collaboration, will be a lot of exchange of IP, patent, and know-how. So for a couple of time, you will see those new IP exchange will get a name of military and civil collaboration, which gives a very good observation window, see into what is going on in China's innovation ecosystem. Observation number 3 from IP exchange is the new IP monetization model. What do you mean by monetization? Give an example is IP pledge. IP pledge is you pledge, you use your IP as collateral to get bank loan, okay? And because IP is intangible asset, we use the terms that you can called pledge. An easy example would be like if you own like 100 on IBM's share in the European exchange market, it worth 100 or 1,000 dollars. You can pledge the security to a bank and borrow money from the bank, like 30 or even 40 dollars, like 30 to 40%. By this way, you do not lose your ownership to the security. But at the same time, you get some cash out from this asset that help you to complete other operational tasks. So by the same token, IP is kind of asset, right? That's why it could become a target in the IP exchange, like a security exchange. So in IP exchange, you can pledge your IP, your patent, your trademark, your copyright to bank and get some loans from the bank. There are so many new models happening in China, and like every quarter, I will receive new information how people use this kind of technique to come up with new service model. And this is where you can observe those dynamic or those development in China. So let's come some demo about how IP exchange offer, what kind of information they can offer. Well, but I need to remind you, many of these information about IP exchange are in Chinese, but fortunately, many of them have a website. I think most of the state provincial level or above IP exchange, they got a website. They're about 30 to 50. And there are probably more than 100 IP exchange in local level, which information of them are usually not on the website. But for 30 or 50, this kind of website, already a lot of information. You can just go to their website, and my trick is use Google Translation. The website in Chinese, you can quickly turn it into Italian or into like English to get a sense of the key information that is happening, like the title, the focus of the this IP exchange, or the what's new business model, new IP monetization model they are adopting. Or you can go to like research institute, like IC Tiger 2020. We have some report and article discussing, continue to release this kind of information, this kind of summary table on our website. And then demonstration number 2, how to get insight from IP exchange in China. Remember, we talked about the IP monetization model, how to utilize IP. One approach is to use called IP pledge. And this chart shows the balance of the loan accumulated by the patent pledge in the past few years. You can see the trend is very robust. It grows very quickly. I think this year already billions of RMB of this kind of transaction are taking place in China. So by looking at the trend, you can at least get a sense of how China's IP business model, how IP transaction is becoming, how fast or in what direction. Okay, today's time is short, so I just give 2 examples, but let me give a very quick summary. To look at the IP exchange, we understand why they are being built. What's the reason, what's the economic reason or social reason they are being built, policy reason, and also by looking at the title of those new established IP exchange, you can see the direction the government's campaign, the effort is put into. And if you look into the IP exchange itself, you can see many new IP monetization model, IP commercialization model is taking place, those activities.